Thanks for your consideration of the views expressed in this ThinkTech commentary, which we are calling Trump versus Cuba. Recently, Trump claimed that Cuba poses a threat to the USA and has stated that he will cut off all oil shipments to the country, which had been coming from Venezuela. He also threatened tariffs against any country that continues to trade with Cuba, putting Mexico in the position of probably having to stop its oil exports to Cuba as well. The reality: Cuba is a nation on the brink of economic collapse and cannot possibly be any kind of threat to the USA. Its disastrous economy is the result of its own mismanagement over decades, along with the very strict 60-plus-year embargo against it by the United States. The historical background and the unexpected parallels to Hawaii. Cuba was a colony of Spain until the Spanish-American War in the summer of 1898. This war, drummed up partly by inflammatory newspaper stories and the accidental explosion of the American Navy ship the USS Maine in Havana Harbor, blamed on Spanish sabotage, which was a lie, ended quickly and resulted in the USA claiming Spanish colonies Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. The U.S. ran Cuba on and off in the early 1900s till it became independent, but economic control continued. American tourism was an important part of the Cuban economy, and all Cubans who could afford to lived as much like Americans as possible by purchasing U.S. cars, appliances, radios and TVs, etc. Fidel Castro took over Cuba in 1959 and gradually imposed strict communism, which caused many Cuban citizens to flee to the U.S. Strong anti-communism feelings in America in the early 1960s granted Cuban refugees special elevated status if they made it to U.S. soil, including being fast-tracked to naturalization. This status, however, is no longer in effect. Hawaiian parallels. Cuba and Hawaii are located at the same latitude, and both their economies for much of the 20th centuries were based on growing and processing sugarcane. The USA was the main market for both their sugar outputs. The city of Havana surrendered to the U.S. military during the Spanish-American War on the same day that the U.S. staged the annexation ceremony of the Hawaiian Islands, August 21, 1898. American tourism became increasingly important economically to both economies in the 1950s, and both Havana and Honolulu began to grow with this income, with more hotels constructed. However, Cuba was taken over by Fidel Castro on January 1, 1959, which was the beginning of the end of American tourism, and the following year, all American and other foreign businesses and investments. Meanwhile, just over 2 months later, Hawaii became the 50th state on March 12, 1959. Soon after, the first passenger jet planes began to serve the Hawaiian Islands. So while Cuba began to shut down in 1959, Hawaii went in the exact opposite direction and started an unprecedented boom. The tallest building in the entire country of Cuba was constructed in 1958. Honolulu continues to build more high-rises to add to the 400-plus it already has. What's Trump's game here? First, regime change in Cuba would fulfill the dreams of hundreds of thousands of Cuban expats in the USA, who are overwhelmingly concentrated in Florida and who are overwhelmingly right-wing and pro-Trump, although some have become disillusioned by the offenses committed by ICE. These are MAGA supporters in a red state, so destroying Cuba's government would be a gift to them, along with other refugees from Venezuela and other Latin American countries who are also rightist. Cuba is an economically wrecked country which is ripe to be seized by the USA for the benefit of innumerable American businesses and predatory individuals. There is also the desire for vengeance for lost assets by Cuban expat citizens, although all the original refugees have long since died. A number of American corporations also lost substantial money when Fidel ordered all foreign-owned assets seized by his government in 1960. This included more than one American oil company that lost refineries as well as gas stations, along with corporations like Coca-Cola and Hilton Hotels. But even without these justifications, numerous Americans will jump at the chance to exploit what they can from this currently untouched country. The disconnect. Whatever Trump publicly claims about Cuba and his justifications for punishing it further, nothing he states will be above board or truthful. We can speculate about his actual motivations, but must just continue to observe as he says he is in discussion with the Cuban government. These matters were the subject of a recent ThinkTech talk show. To see that show, go to thinktechhawaii.com or youtube.com/thinktechhawaii and search on Trump versus Cuba. Thanks for watching, and thanks again for your consideration of the views expressed in this ThinkTech commentary. We look forward to seeing you again soon for the next one. Aloha.